Take a breath and settle in. Welcome to Metaphysics at the Movies, the podcast where film meets deeper meaning and every scene becomes a doorway to insight. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing someone who doesn't just watch movies, he reads them. Reverend Rich P. is a Unity minister, speaker, and teacher of practical spirituality, known for blending real-life wisdom with metaphysical truth in a way that's grounded, accessible, and powerful. Around here, it's not just about what's happening on the screen. It's about what's happening within us as we watch. So whether it's drama, comedy, or action, Reverend Rich P. helps us uncover the spiritual principles, the hidden patterns, and the deeper messages woven into the stories we love. Get ready to see movies differently, and maybe even see yourself differently too. Let's get into it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Metaphysics at the Movies. I am Rev Rich, and I'm glad you're here. Now, last time we were running around through ancient temples with Indiana Jones trying to figure out what we were chasing and why we were chasing it. This week, we're blowing up the White House. Well, we're not. The aliens are. We're talking about Independence Day. This is one of those movies that just built for summer. Aliens, spaceships, explosions. Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum somehow figures out how to save the entire planet with a computer. And of course, one of those movie speeches that make you want to stand up and cheer even though you've heard it 100 times. But watching Independence Day again, something struck me that I didn't think I really noticed when I saw it the first time. This movie starts with everybody separated. Different countries, different governments, different families, different priorities. People are arguing. People are competing. People are trying to protect their own little corner of the world. Then suddenly something happens that make all those divisions look pretty small. And that's where I found the spiritual message. Because when the thing threatening everybody becomes bigger than the thing separating everybody, people start remembering something. We're in this together, and maybe we shouldn't need aliens from outer space to figure that out. So let's think about the beginning of the movie. Nobody really knows what happens. These enormous ships appear. People react in completely different ways. Some people get scared. Others are fascinated just to see the ships. Some are celebrating. Some people are trying to communicate with them. Some people saying basically, don't worry, everything is going to be fine. And meanwhile, David Levinson, or Jeff Goldblum's character, is looking at the information and realizing, no, something isn't right. There's a countdown. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that part interesting spiritually because we do this in real life all the time. We can all be looking at the exact same situation and see completely different things. I like to say that perspective is personal. One person sees opportunity, another sees danger, one sees hope, another sees disaster. One person says everything is falling apart, and another says maybe something new is trying to happen. Same situation, different consciousness. That's not to say that we should pretend bad things aren't bad. One thing I appreciate about the movie is that once those spaceships start firing, nobody's standing there saying, I'm just going to hold a positive thought. No, get up and run. These are the times where spiritual, appropriate response is to get out the way. Practical Christianity has to be practical. But our conscience still matters because our consciousness helps us determine what to do next. Are we going to panic? Are we going to freeze? Are we going to blame? Are we going to turn against each other? Or do we ask, what is mine to do now? I think that's a much better spiritual question than, why is this happening to me? Sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes there isn't a satisfying why. But we can still ask, what can I do from here? And that's what I like about President Whitmore in the movie. He doesn't start out as this perfect, fearless leader. In fact, he's being criticized. People think he's too young to question his leadership. He has a family. He's worried. He's trying to figure out what in the world is happening, just like everyone else. And then situations ask him for more. Have you ever had that happen? Life suddenly required a version of you that you hadn't met yet. You didn't feel ready. You didn't apply for the job. You weren't sitting around saying, you know what? I'd really like a major life crisis so I can discover my inner strength. Nobody ever says that. And then something happens. A relationship changes. You lose somebody. The job ends. You get the phone call. The plan falls apart. And suddenly that version of you that got you this far isn't quite enough for what's next. And that's when something deeper has to come forward. I had moments in my life when I looked at what was happening and thought, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Maybe you've been there, and here's the strange thing. Sometimes you don't know how strong you are because life hasn't required the strength of you yet. You don't know you can make the hard decisions until you're standing in front of it. You don't know that you can start over until you're starting over is the only door left. You don't know you can survive the loss until you're living through the day after it happened. Then one day you look back and realize, I'm still here. Not unchanged, but here. And maybe stronger in places I didn't even know needed strengthening. That's one of those things that crisis can do. It reveals us, not necessarily the person who thought we were, but the person underneath all of that. But here's why Independence Day gets really interesting for me. Eventually, everybody realizes this isn't America's problem. It's not a Russia's problem, a Britain's problem, a Japan's problem. It's not anybody's individual problem. It's a humanity's problem. Suddenly, all the boundaries we thought were so important aren't very important anymore. And I couldn't help thinking, why are human beings so good at coming together during disasters, and sometimes so bad at doing it during ordinary life? I want you to think about it. A hurricane hits, people hate to help strangers. A house burns down, neighbors show up. Somebody has a medical emergency in the grocery store, and suddenly nobody cares who voted for them. Nobody's asking which church to attend. Nobody's asking what your theology is. Somebody needs help. And for a moment, we're just human beings helping another human being. And I wish we could remember that without the disasters, because spiritually, the disaster doesn't create our connection. It reveals the connections that we already there. And that's important because we don't become one when tragedy happens. We remember that we're one all along. Unity teaches that there's one presence and one power. If there's one presence, then there's nowhere God isn't. That means divine presence in me isn't competing with the divine presence in you. We come from one source. We may express it differently. We may think differently. We may even disagree. We may even have different cultures, traditions, experiences, and a way we see the world. But underneath all those differences, there's something deeper. One life, one presence, one source. That's not just a nice idea to put on a greeting card. That's something we're supposed to live. There's a passage from Paul that I keep thinking about, 1 Corinthians 12. Paul talks about the body having many parts. The hand isn't the eye isn't the foot, and everybody doesn't have the same function. But they belong to one body. I love the image because unity doesn't require sameness. Unity isn't uniformity. These are different things. We can be one without being identical. Actually, Independence Day would be a pretty boring movie if every character had the same skill. David had the computer knowledge. Stephen Hiller had the flying skills. President Whitmore brings leadership and his own military experience. Julius brings Julius, and I love him. He's complaining, he's worrying, he's praying, he's giving advice, whether anybody asks for it or not. Basically, he's family. But everybody brings something, even Russell Case. Now, Russell is one of my favorite characters in the movie because nobody sees him as a hero. He's the guy people laugh at. He's been telling everybody for years that aliens abducted him. Nobody believes him. He's got problems. He's not polished, and yet he's not the person you'd put in the recruitment poster. But when the moment comes, Russell matters. That'll preach right there, because we have the habit of deciding who matters based on appearances. We look at education, money, position, status, how somebody talks, how somebody dresses, their past, their mistakes, and we decide who has something valuable to offer. Spirit doesn't seem to work that way. Over and over again, in Scripture, God uses the person everybody else overlooked. Moses doesn't think he's a speaker. David is the kid nobody thought to call in from the field. The disciples aren't exactly the religious elite. And Jesus has a habit of sitting with people everybody else has already decided don't matter. Maybe we should pay attention to that, because the person you've written off may carry something the situation needs. And maybe you've been writing yourself off too. Maybe you've been saying, I'm too old, I'm too young, I don't have the education, I made too many mistakes, I'm not ready, somebody else can do it better. Okay, maybe somebody can do it better, but do it anyway. You don't have to be the best person in the world at something to be the person who's called to show up. Russell didn't need to become somebody else before he can make a difference. He just has to be willing when his moment arrives. And then there's David. He's probably one of the smallest people in the world in this movie, but he can solve everything alone either. He figures out the countdown. Later, he figures out how they might disable the alien shield, but an idea isn't enough. He needs other people. Somebody had to listen. Somebody had to fly the plane. Somebody had to coordinate the attack. Somebody had to communicate the plan. That's something I've had to learn too. We love the idea of self-made person. I did it myself. No, you didn't. None of us did. Somebody taught you. Somebody encouraged you. Somebody opened the door. Somebody brought something from you. Somebody hired you. Somebody prayed for you. Somebody watched your kids. Somebody gave you information. Somebody believed in you when you were ready to quit. We are interdependent, and that's not a weakness. That's life. Look at nature. Everything is connected. Trees exchange gases with the atmosphere. Plants need pollinators. Bodies need ecosystems of microorganisms just to function. Creation itself seems to be saying nothing thrives completely alone. So why do we keep thinking we're supposed to? Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is say, I need help. The 3 words, hard for some of us, I need help. Not because you're weak, because you're wise enough to realize you weren't created to carry everything by yourself. And I know personally, I've had a big, and even today I still have issues with asking for help, but I also know that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. So let's talk about fear for a minute, because this movie is full of it, and understandably so. If I look out a window tomorrow and there's a spaceship size of a city hovering over Martinsburg, I'm probably going to have a moment. I'm spiritual, I'm also human, but fear does something interesting in the movie. At first, fear scatters people. Everybody runs. Everybody tries to survive. But eventually, the same threat caused people to cooperate. The circumstances don't change immediately. The relationships to the circumstances change. And that's huge, because we spend a lot of time praying for circumstances to change, and then there's nothing wrong with that. I've prayed, God, please change this, probably more times than I can count. But sometimes the situation doesn't change when I want it to, and the prayer eventually becomes, okay, God, if this isn't changing yet, change me in it. Show me how to meet these differentialities. Show me how to meet this differently. Show me what I need to see. Show me who I need to become. And that's a different prayer. And sometimes that's where the miracles start. Not outside, inside. And then there's that moment toward the end of the movie that everybody remembers. President Whitmore gives the speech before the final battle. He tells them they aren't only fighting for a nation anymore, they're fighting together. And the line that sticks is that the day will become humanity's Independence Day. It's a great movie moment, but underneath the Hollywood speech, there's something worth hearing. They win when they stop acting like separate groups fighting separate battles. They finally recognize the shared problem, and they share what they know. That's the past I want us to sit with. They share what they know. Information starts moving around the world. One group discusses something instead of hoarding it and passes it on. What if we lived like that more often? What if the question wasn't, how do I get ahead? What if it's something it was, how can what I know help somebody else? What if churches did that, ministries, businesses, communities? What if people in general did that? I don't lose my light because I help you shine. Your success doesn't diminish mine. Your gift doesn't threaten my gift. Your calling doesn't cancel mine. There's enough room. That's abundance consciousness. Scarcity says if you win, there's less for me. Spirit says there's enough. There's enough ideas, opportunities, love, purpose, God. There's enough going around that we have to change that perspective of scarcity. And I think that's why unity power for the episode has to be love. We talked about love before, but love is bigger than romance. Charles Fillmore associates love with attraction, harmony, and unity. Love draws us together, especially when fear tries to separate. Love says, how are we connected? Fear says, how are we different? Love says, how can we help? Fear says, how do I protect mine? Now, love doesn't mean we agree about everything. I think that's where people get confused. Unity isn't pretending differences don't exist. It isn't avoiding difficult conversations. It isn't saying harmful behavior is okay. Love can have boundaries. Love can say no, and love can disagree. But love refuses to forget the humanity of the person on the other side. That's the work. It's easy to love people who agree with us. That's beginner level spirituality. The real work starts when somebody gets on your nerves, when somebody sees the world differently, when somebody pushes every button you got and apparently found a few buttons you didn't even know you were installed. That's where we find out whether the stuff is philosophy or it's practice. So here's what I want you to do this week. I'm calling it the one team practice. Nothing fancy. Think about one area of your life where you've been operating like you're completely on your own. Maybe it's at work, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your health, your ministry, your finances, a project, something you're trying to figure out. Ask yourself, who could I invite into this? Maybe you need advice, maybe you need encouragement, maybe you need professional help, maybe you just need somebody who can listen without trying to fix you. Then I want you to turn that question around and ask, who around me might need something I already know and how to give? A phone call, maybe it's an introduction, a resource, a prayer, an hour of your time, a little encouragement. We don't need aliens hovering over the planet before we start helping each other. We can practice this one on our own. And there's one more thing I don't want you to miss. The movie is called Independence Day, but ironically, the people survived through interdependence. I love that because interdependent has value. We need to learn to stand on our own feet. We need personal responsibility. We need boundaries. We need to make our own decisions, but spiritual maturity eventually teaches us something beyond the independence. It's interdependence. I can stand on my own and still reach for your hand. I can know who I am and still need community. I can take responsibility for my life and still allow people to support me. I can have my own relationship with God and still be blessed by yours. Maybe that's the evolution. Dependence says, do it for me. Independence says, I'll do it for myself. Interdependence says, let's do what we can do together. And that's where the movie ends up. No one hero is saying everything. A whole lot of very different people were doing their parts for this success. So let's take a moment and take a breath. And let's affirm together that there's one presence and one power active in my life and in all creation. I am connected to that divine life within every person. I honor my gifts and I honor the gifts of others. I release the belief that I have to do everything alone. I am willing to give help. I am willing to receive help. And divine love harmonizes, connects, and guides me. I choose cooperation over competition. I choose connection over separation. And I remember that we are stronger together. And so it is. You know, when I first saw Independence Day, I wasn't thinking about any of this. I was thinking Will Smith punched an alien. That was pretty much the depth of my metaphysical analysis. And honestly, it's great. It's still a great scene, but watching the movie now, I see something else. I see people who thought they were separated discovering they needed each other. I see ordinary people becoming important. I see people sharing what they know. I see fear slowing, giving away for cooperations. And I see a reminder that maybe one of humanity's greatest spiritual challenges isn't learning how to become independent. Maybe it's learning how to become interdependent and to know who we are without needing somebody else to complete us, while also understanding that we're never meant to walk through life alone. That's community. That's practical spirituality. That's love in action. So maybe this week, when you catch yourself thinking, I have to handle this myself, stop, ask, and do it. And ask yourself, do I? Maybe there's somebody who would be honored to walk beside you, and maybe somewhere nearby. There's somebody who needs exactly what you know how to give. So thank you for joining me for another episode of Metaphysics at the Movies and our summer blockbusters that teach spiritual truth series. If this episode made you think of somebody, share it with them, especially that person who tries to do everything alone. You know who they are, and you can't think of anybody, it might be you. Because one of the biggest truths in Independence Day is that we are not here to do life by ourselves. We need each other. We need different voices, different gifts, and even different perspectives. And sometimes the breakthrough comes when we stop asking, how do I handle this alone? And start asking, who is Spirit inviting me to walk with? So take that with you this week. Look for one place where you can ask for help. Look for one place where you can offer help. And remember that connection isn't weakness. It's how we build. And make sure you follow the podcast and subscribe, because next time we're going to go somewhere very different. We're leaving the alien invasions behind and stepping into a world that looks perfectly normal, except it isn't. We're talking about The Truman Show. And the episode's going to ask the question that may hit a little closer to home than we expect. What if the life you were living was built from beliefs you never consciously chose? We're going to talk about conditioning, fear, identity, authenticity, and what happens when you begin to question the world you've always accepted as normal. Because Truman's biggest challenge isn't escaping a television set, it's waking up. And maybe that's the spiritual journey too. Waking up to the beliefs we inherited, waking up to the roles we've been playing, and waking up to the places where fear has been keeping us inside a world that no longer fits. The next time on Metaphysics in the Movies, The Truman Show, what if the life you're living isn't really yours? Until then, look for the places where fear is trying to separate you. Look for the people's spirit maybe inviting you to stand beside, and remember, we don't have to wait for the world to fall apart before we start coming together. And I want you to take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings, my friend. I will see you next week.
And just like that, the credits start to roll. But here's the truth. What you saw in the movie is already playing out in your life. So the question is, what are you choosing to believe? What role are you stepping into? And what truth are you ready to live? That's the work. If this episode spoke to you, don't just sit with it. Walk with it, apply it, live it, let it move through you. And if you're ready to go deeper, more teachings, tools, journals, and ways to activate this in your everyday life, head over to revrichp.com. That's where the conversation continues. Until next time, keep watching, keep awakening, and take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings.